afternoon, Sunshine Fam. I would like to welcome you to my channel. My name is Chloe Murphy, for those of you that are new. So if you are new to my channel, I would really appreciate you hitting the subscribe button below and that notification bell so you know when I upload a new video. And I'd also love your comments. Any kind of comments, I don't care. So I have been talking a long time about doing a new series based on a TV show that I saw on YouTube called Who Do You Think You Are? And it's basically celebrities talking about their genealogy. So I've been doing some digging into my ancestry, and I'd like to start by introducing you to myself and my immediate family. So as I said, my name is Chloe Murphy. So I was born in 1967, which makes me very old, I know. Most of you are of the older, according to my analytics here on YouTube, most of you are not the young generation, but the older generation, my age and a little bit younger maybe. I have been married twice. First time I got married in 1986 and got divorced in 1997. My now ex-husband's name is David. He is living in the South. And together, the two of us had 4 children. 3 are living and 1 was a miscarriage. So I will name you our children the way that you know them. So my oldest daughter's name is Clary. And she is married to a gentleman who doesn't have a screen name, or not screen name, a stage name on my channel. So I will call him by his first name, which is Nick. They were married in 2018. So to give you an indication, this is me and my first husband. That's David. And here is a picture. This picture's kind of dusty, but here's a picture of Clary and Nick on their wedding day. She wore the same dress that I wore for my second wedding. So I'm not as well organized this time, but in any case, they have 4 children. You know their names: Adriana, Simon, Rebecca, and Matthew. And so from there, we go to the child that I lost. Her name is Jennifer. We named her Jennifer. I consider the day that I lost her in April of 1989. It was obviously before I gave birth to her, but she ended up being a miscarriage. I lost her at week 20 in the pregnancy. It was a very hard time for me. Going back to Clary, she was born 6 weeks early, and we literally lost her within hours of her birth, and I did not find out until several hours later. And she was put in what people now are calling the NICU. She stayed in the hospital she was born at in Minneapolis for 9 days, and then she was transferred to Minneapolis Children's Hospital, where she stayed until she was nearly a month old. She was put on a breathing machine for about the first 6 months of her life, but obviously she made it through because she's now married and has 4 children of her own. So Jennifer, I lost her a week before she was born. And so she was also born in April of 1989. The doctor told me the day after, or about a week after she was born, when I went for my follow-up visit, excuse me, that had she survived, she would have been born with Down syndrome. Now, I question how he would have known that, because in 1989, medicine wasn't like it is today. So he determined that from her toes, the size of her toes. Well, they gave me like this piece of paper. Well, it wasn't really, more like a picture kind of thing. That's the texture of it. And on it, it has her footprints in ink on there. Her footprints were only from heel to toe about that big. So her toes would have been like itty bitty, like that big. So how they could determine that she would have been born with Down syndrome with toes that teeny tiny back in 1989 just floors me. But she is buried at a cemetery up in Osseo, Minnesota. And every year I go out to see her. I have done videos out there that I've shared with all of you. And you know most of her story because I have told you in the past about her. The day that I found out that I lost her was the longest day of my life. But moving on. So about a month and a half later, 2 months later, I got pregnant with Silver Star. And she was born a day late. So all of my children were born around a holiday. All my living children, I should say, and all my living children were born on a Friday. So Silver Star was born in, I don't have her birthday down on here, but she was born in 1990. Not very long after my birthday, actually. So Silver Star, I have her picture here. After I tell you a little bit more information about her, she got married to who you know as Drafay Wolf back last year, last fall in 2025, and had a very beautiful wedding. This was a picture of them when they were engaged, after they were engaged, I believe, or they were just dating, but right around that same time. So that is Silver Star and Drafay Wolf. And let's see, was it this picture? Sorry, I'm not very organized today. I was more organized the last time. So after her, about a year and a half later, I got pregnant with who you know as C-Dog, C/DAWG. And he was born in 1991, not very long after that Halloween snowstorm that everybody talks about every year. And he has grown up to be quite the gentleman. For a while he was in the Army National Guard, and he served in the Army National Guard for about 3 years and then got out. And so here is a picture. I'm trying to keep the glare down on the picture, but here's a picture of all of us, obviously after I divorced David. So this is me, and then we've got Clary and Silver Star holding my dog Lucky when Lucky was still alive, and there's C-Dog. Of course, you know all of them because they've been in my past videos. So after I got divorced from David, I met my second now ex-husband. He lived in Illinois, and I lived up here in the Twin Cities of Minnesota. And his name is Ron. We were married in 2001, not long before 9/11. And the relationship was kind of rocky from the beginning. We lived with his mother for about 7 years down in the Chicagoland area, and then things were not going well. It was very verbally abusive, and so I moved out, and then he kind of followed me, and I moved to close to the Wisconsin border of Illinois, and tried it up there for about 3 years. Of course, at this point, I had the children. At first, when David and I got divorced, he ended up with the children, but then, long story that I won't get into here, but he ended up moving down to the South in about 2001, and he allowed me to have the kids. This was after a court hearing, of course, but we won't get into that here. So, going back to David, he was born in 1960. Ron was born in 1962. I did not have any children with Ron, and so after a tumultuous marriage that went from verbal abuse to physical abuse, I got divorced from him in 2008 and moved back to the Twin Cities. So obviously I didn't have any children with him. So I've got a couple pictures of me and Ron on our wedding day. So this is one of them. And then to show more of the wedding dress that I had, that was a 6-foot-long train that Sea-Dog carried down the aisle. That was kind of a funny story. So I got divorced from him in 2008 and moved back home. So now I'm going to tell you about my parents. And I'm going to be very private about this because, as many of you know, I am very private on my YouTube channel. My father, I will only use his initials. His initials are JBL, and he was born in 1933. His occupations, past occupations, because obviously he doesn't work anymore, he went to the seminary to learn how to be a priest, but he found that that just wasn't his niche. So he left the seminary and was drafted into the Army during the Korean War. He was never deployed because they needed somebody that knew how to type. And when they asked his unit who knew how to type, my father was the only one that raised his hand. So he stayed stateside. He had a good friend. I don't know if they met in the Army or if they knew each other prior to that. I do know that he was born on a farm in central Minnesota. I think he moved a few times on the farms, but he stayed in central Minnesota for quite a while. And so he ended up being a staff sergeant in the Army, but as I was saying, his best friend, like I said, I don't really know much about his best friend, whether they met in the Army or he knew him beforehand, but they both were drafted around the same time. His friend went to Korea, came back thankfully, and in recent years his friend passed away. So some of the other jobs that he's had was for a company called Donald's Manufacturing. Some of these companies don't exist anymore. He had a job at the warehouse, in a warehouse, and then he worked for a company called Cities Service Oil Company, where he worked in the office part of it. And my grandfather on my mother's side had started an asphalt paving company called Burry and Carlson that was very lucrative here in the Twin Cities. So my father worked for him for quite some time. So that is my dad. Nothing very not extinguished. What's the word I'm looking for? There was nothing really in his past that was prominent, you know, not like aristocracy or anything interesting or exciting really in his background. My mother's name, I will give you her initials as well, is EMB. And she was born in 1938 in Minneapolis. They moved into a home in Bloomington where they stayed for a few years and then built a home in Minnetonka where I was raised, and lived there for many years. And then in 1995, they moved from that home. They sold the home and moved into a townhouse. And so some of her occupations were in the steno pool of a manufacturer in St. Paul. She didn't know that, she couldn't remember the name of it. And then she also worked for a company, the company of City Service Oil Company, where she was a secretary. That's where my parents met. And after her father passed away in 1979, I'll get more into his details in the next video, she worked for a small retail store that was called St. Paul Book and Stationery. And she didn't work there for very long, I think only just a few months. But the company itself was kind of like a Staples or an Office Depot, that kind of a company, where they sold office supplies, they catered to teachers, that kind of thing. My parents were married in 1959 and had me as a child. And then years later, I found out in 2009 that I had a half-brother who currently lives in the state of Pennsylvania. I won't get into very many details about him. His name is Brad. But I did not find out about him until 2009, and I won't get into the details about that as well either. But what I do want to share with you, okay, so a picture of my parents from years ago. These are my parents. So J and E. And that was taken, I think, at their church, when the churches used to put out like parishioner phone books, if you will, so they'd have their pictures in there, you know, of all the parishioners of that particular church. So that's when that one was taken. So years ago, I don't know if people still do this, but back when my parents were children, they used to take their parents used to take their baby booties and get them bronzed. So I have my father's baby booties, which are these. So these are his actual baby booties. At one time I thought that they had the date on the bottom of the shoes, but they do not. So these were my father's baby booties. And then my mother's baby shoes, well, I shouldn't say baby, because I mean, obviously a baby's feet are much bigger than that, but young child. And my mother's, these almost look like baby booties, because these are much smaller. But these are her baby booties, also bronzed. So I have her baby booties, and for some reason there's a staple in the heel. I don't know if her shoes were falling apart and they stapled them to keep them together. But obviously they did that before they got them bronzed. So my mother grew up in a much different way that my father did. As I said, my father grew up on a farm. My mom grew up in Minneapolis. And when she was younger, she took piano lessons. She took dance lessons, so she knows how to tap, well, did know how to tap. And so years later, she became the organist for our church when we were growing up. And so I came from a very musical family. And so my father played concertina because he is very German. My mother is German, Irish, English, and French. Forgot to grab my flags this time. Actually, hang on 1 second. So, I took this one out for the next video, so I'll put this one back in here. So I have this sitting on my computer stand. So it shows that I have the French flag, the British flag, the Irish flag, of course, and the German flag. And then in the middle I have the American flag. Oops. Didn't mean for that to happen. Just trying to pull the flag back up. So these are all my nationalities. And so this is the beginning of my story of who I am. Now, I have moved around quite a lot myself. And I've really only lived in 3 different states. And one of them I only lived in for 4 months. And you know that because I did videos down there. I didn't start doing YouTube until after my divorce from Ron. Well after my divorce from Ron. So I've been doing YouTube for about 10 years. I have also worked in retail, number of retail stores. Started out actually at St. Paul Book and Stationery. That company no longer exists because it was shut down after Staples and Office Depot and Office Max started coming into play. So that company no longer exists. They had several stores throughout the Midwest, or actually I think only in the Twin Cities because St. Paul Book and Stationery. And I started out as a stock person there when I was 16, and then that was right around the holidays, and then after the holidays were done and things started settling down, then they made me a cashier. So I worked there for about 3.5 years. I'm not going to go into a lot of details about my jobs or occupations or anything, but then I moved to another company called Nelson's Office Supply. That's when I was pregnant with Clary, and I got very, very sick with her. Had major morning sickness for about 3 months, lost a lot of weight, lost like 12 pounds. I was actually 3 months pregnant when I was walking down the aisle with David. We had been engaged before we got pregnant. So, in any case, and then I had worked in retail, in different retail stores for some time. And then in my early 20s, after I got married, I moved into office jobs, mostly through temp work. So I had done like a file clerk, I had done general office, and then I got into, I kind of inherited my father's typing skills. So I was very good at typing, so I did data entry for over 30 years. And then I went back into retail because data entry doesn't really exist too much anymore. So it hasn't been too terribly long that I went back into retail. It was after I moved back here in 2008. No, actually it was even after that. When did I start working at the grocery store? I'd done data entry for a good 30 plus years. And then I started working at the grocery store in 2019, January of 2019. And I worked there through the pandemic, and then I left there. You can go back and watch those videos about why I left. So that was during the height of the pandemic. Then I tried doing DoorDash for a while. Was making really good money at the beginning. And then I got out of DoorDash. Actually, I think I was still doing DoorDash in 2021 when I moved down to Amarillo, Texas. In between there, I had lived in Illinois, in northern Illinois, for those 10 years. And then I moved back up here. And then I was going to move to San Diego. Excuse me, got a frog in my throat. I was going to move to San Diego. That was my plan, but I didn't do very much research. And you know me with research. I'm always doing research, but I was just in such a hurry to get out of this state because number one, I hate the winters. Number two, had to do a lot with abuse that I grew up with. I've never gone into great detail about the abuse that I endured growing up. My 2 marriages ended. My first marriage ended basically from a lot of verbal abuse, verbal and emotional abuse. Personally, I think verbal and emotional abuse are pretty much the same thing. And Then with my second marriage, it ended with verbal abuse and it got into physical abuse. So when it started turning physical towards me and my children, that's when I said enough is enough. And I got out of that marriage. Am I in touch with either of my ex-husbands, you may be asking? Very rarely do I talk to my children's father. Obviously, I saw him at the wedding of Silver Star and Durfee Wolf, because obviously he came up for that. Prior to that, I hadn't seen him. Well, no, I can't say that. I was going to say I hadn't seen him since Clary's wedding, but every time that she has a child, he's come up to visit his family, who still lives, some of his family still lives here in the Twin Cities. And so he's come up to see his family right around the time that Clary has had a child. So I've seen him like 3 times since Clary has been married. When Adriana was born, when Simon was born, and when Rebecca was born, I'm pretty, yeah, he saw Matthew at the wedding. I don't know if he had come up before that, though. I don't think he did. Because Matthew was born last year, and then later in the years when Clary and Durfee Wolf got married, so that's when he first saw his grandson. So I'm not really in constant contact with David. With Ron, on and off since the divorce, we had been talking, but he is very unstable emotionally, mentally, and it got to the point where I had had enough, and since I didn't have children with him, there was no reason for me to keep in touch with him. So I do not talk to him at all anymore. He did last fall after the wedding, or right around the time of the wedding of Silver Star, he did somehow reach out to her just to let her know that his nephew had a baby. So Silver Star, I didn't know this because I hadn't been talking to him. So Silver Star reached out to me and told me this. And so I immediately went into Mama Bear mode. And I contacted him again, even though I had him blocked. I unblocked him to let him know to leave my kids alone. And I was not very happy that he was reaching out to my children, because once the divorce happened, he has absolutely no claim to even be in contact with my children from my first marriage, because they were never his children. He never adopted them, anything. He was just their stepfather. Once he and I got divorced, that connection between him and my kids was broken, in my opinion. So yes, I did keep in touch with him periodically throughout the years. He had seen my kids since I had moved back in 2008, but over the last several years, no. My children have blocked him, I have blocked him, so no, I am not in contact with Ron at all anymore. So this ends this video of my family tree. And so in the next video, what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to give you the information about my grandparents, my great-grandparents on both sides, and going back even one more generation on my grandparents' side. I still need to do a little bit more research on my great-grandparents on my father's side. I will have stories of things that I remember with my grandparents. I'm going to start it out on my dad's side. Let's put it that way. I'm kind of all over the place, but I'm going to start it out on my dad's side. Obviously, to protect myself, I will not be giving the last name of my grandfather. I will not be giving the full name of my grandmother. I possibly will give you her maiden name, because that name is quite popular, but has nothing to do with me and my name. So, Gotta protect, right? So anyway, so because I only have 2 generations back from my father's side, my grandfather's side on my dad's side, and even at this time, I only have first names of my father's grandparents. No, wait. Let me rethink this. I think it would be my 2 times great-grandparents on my grandfather's side, on my dad's side. So it would have been his great-grandparents, and all I have for them is their first names. I don't have birth year or death year. I don't have any other information about them at this time. I still need to look into that. So I want to give you guys as much information, keeping everybody private, as I possibly can. I hate the fact that I have to do it this way to cater to somebody, but that's all I'm going to say about it. For those of you that saw my original video on this and my follow-up video, I have since taken those down because I feel I have to cater to this person. It was who I thought it was, and that's all I'm going to say about it. Hate that I have to do that, but you win. I shut up, okay? That's all I'm going to say. So anyway, so those of you that have seen the previous video, you obviously know, or the previous 2 videos, I have since taken those down. I will be taking those down as soon as I'm done with this video. And so obviously you know more information about me than what I put in this video. Those of you that saw the previous video that wasn't even put out a week ago. But at this point, I'm taking those other people out of this video. I'm never going to mention them again because as far as I'm concerned, they have no relation to me. So that's all I'm going to say about that. This is only going to be about me and my ancestors. And I'm not going to give any personal information about anybody. I'm just going to give years. That's all I'm doing. So, in any case, I hope you will continue to follow me on this journey of my version of Who Do You Think You Are, that I'm calling Who Am I? And maybe you guys can look into your ancestry if you're interested in that kind of thing, using the 2 websites that I have already given you. And it's really kind of fun. So this video doesn't have anything that's really that interesting in it. But if you go back and watch Who Do You Think You Are, sometimes you do have to go back several generations to find more interesting facts that bring us into the American history, even our ancestors that came from Europe, or maybe even Asia or Africa or Australia, Russia, something like that. It's kind of fun getting to learn about, kind of introducing yourself to your ancestors, even though they're long gone. You get to learn interesting facts about who they were and the fact that their blood is running through your veins. So it's really kind of fun sometimes if you're into that kind of thing. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and let you guys go. Like I said, this is going to be a shorter video. The further back I go into my genealogy right now at this point, in mid-February of 2026, I don't have a lot of information. So the further back I go, it's just getting into names and maybe birth and death dates, and maybe some of them I do have where they were born and where they died. But hopefully if I can continue doing some research, I know my time in my going back to work is getting shorter and shorter every day. Hopefully I'll be back to work within the next 2-3 weeks. And so I won't have as much time to do as much research at that point. But the information that I have starting out has a lot more information in it. And of course, I did take you on an Adventures with Chloe video up to a town called Avon, Minnesota, that was founded by ancestors I will not be telling you about because they weren't like my 2 or 3 times great-grandparents. They were the siblings of one of my great-grandparents, great-great-grandparents, I think it was, on my paternal grandmother's side. So I will not be getting into their information, but their brother's information. And hopefully this summer, I mean, I will have days off from work, obviously. And I'm thinking I'm probably not going to be going back to work full-time, given that I'm still working on getting the shoulder better. But hopefully this summer on my days off, I can go up to central Minnesota and do videos around the areas that they kind of grew up in and kind of show you around that. And maybe make that a part of this series. I don't know if I would put it with this series or with my Adventures with Chloe series. So continue to join me on my journey here with my ancestry and everything. And obviously I'm going to be protecting myself and my children and not using a lot of descriptive information in my videos, using exact dates. I'll use years. I won't use month or day. I will just use years of births, deaths, marriages. That's it. And then of course with the grandparents that I knew, I only knew one great-grandmother on my father's side. And even at that, she passed away when I was very young, and I only have a snapshot of a memory of her. So, and I was told a story about something that I did that was kind of cute, I guess. So I'll share that story when I get to her story as well, but that will be in the next video, I believe. So hope you guys will be able to join me for that next video. I'm hoping to be able to put these out maybe once or twice a week until I go back to work. Then they'll be a little bit more sporadic, but I will continue to share information with you. I do have a couple of documents. One is an actual document, the original, and the other one is a copy, but I would show it to you from a distance, and that one is written in German anyway, and I would only just quickly show it to you and then back it off so that, I mean, I'm sure you could still take a screenshot of it, but whatever. But it wouldn't be giving away too much information anyway, private information. And I did show you the other documentation that I have on the wall that you can't even read the writing on it because it's so faded. That's why I know it's an original. But I would also share pictures of everybody, which, again, I keep trying to do my outros and then I keep forgetting things. So I want to show you. Actually, I'm not going to take it off the wall because it's kind of a pain in the butt to try and put it back on. So forgive the shaky camera work at this point, but I wanted to show you. Let me flip this around so I can make sure that I'm doing it right. Okay, so again, we got it. Okay, let's see if I move it up this way and move it down. I don't know. It's kind of hard to see. Anyway, these are pictures of, yeah, this isn't working very well. There's too much glare. You can't really see it very well. But you have seen, this is Clary and her family. And you have seen them before. I know these bottom two pictures are very glary. But we've got Adriana, if I can point to the camera. That's Adriana. There's Clary and her husband. That's Simon. And then if I could figure out how to get it so that it's not so glared, that's Rebecca right there. And then we've got Matthew over here. But that frame is very hard for me to put back on the wall. So those are her kids. But you guys have seen them in my videos anyway. So, and I do have pictures, obviously, these two pictures here on the wall. You've seen in my past videos anyway. But I'll be including pictures of people that I talk about in my future videos. The ones that I have pictures of. So that's what they do on Who Do You Think You Are anyway. So anyway, now I'm going to shut up, I promise you. It's a much shorter video. So thank you for joining me today on this new adventure for Who Do You Think You Are, which I call Who Am I? And I hope you'll continue to join me on other videos going back through my genealogy, and maybe we'll find out something interesting about my ancestors that is, I still can't think of the word I'm looking for. Prominent, I guess. Interesting, you know. I thought, wouldn't it be cool if I had royalty in my family? Because I am English and I am French, and way back in the day, France was a monarchy. So they did have royalty in France. So you never know. Maybe I'm related to somebody who had interesting ties in Ireland or Germany or something. My dad did say that one of the ancestors, it would have been my great-grandmother on my grandfather's side. He seems to think that she had a very interesting occupation, but when I did my research, I found it not to be true, but I will tell you that story in the next video. People are like, oh, I wouldn't share that kind of information, but I found that it wasn't even true. My dad to this day swears that it is because he was told this by somebody. Don't know who it was, but he seems to think that his grandmother on his dad's side had a very interesting occupation, but when I did my research on this person's name, it did not come up with anything even remotely close to what my father claims that she did. So, but I'll tell you that story in the next video. So thanks for joining me today, and we'll see you guys on the next one. Have a sunny day.